Track 1. Taking the Practical Test. Welcome to this private pilot audio check ride. I'm Matt Dragon, and I'll be your narrator as we listen to a typical exchange between a very well-prepared applicant and an FAA examiner for the private pilot airplane check ride. This is just one example of a typical practical test. You should review the ASA Oral Exam Guidebook for more types of questions that may be asked during your check ride. So, you've studied for long hours, invested hard-earned dollars, your instructor has signed you off, and a big day is at hand. You're ready for the private pilot check ride. Let's talk a little about what you can expect during the test. First, remember you'll likely be nervous. You're only human. Most people don't like to fail, so being tested and judged can make us nervous. Second, remember that everyone wants you to pass. You obviously want to pass. Your instructor wants you to pass. They signed you off and stake their reputation on it. And last but not least, the FAA designated examiner wants you to pass. A bunch of people feel confident you have the tools and talent to pass, so don't sweat it. Remember these 2 points. The FAA wants you to be a safe and competent pilot and has established a set of standards that must be met to issue a private pilot certificate. These are called practical test standards. Your instructor has used and exceeded these standards in your training and in your preparation for the practical test, so you're more than ready to go. So what are the practical test standards? This is a book published by the FAA, and what's in it will be the basis for everything on the test. Your designated examiner might not follow the exact sequence in the book, but is required to cover everything in it during your check ride. It's important for you to understand exactly what might cause you to fail the check ride. I know, it's an unpleasant thought, but sometimes when you know what failure looks like, you have a better time visualizing success. Again, the FAA wants you to be a safe, competent pilot with the proper skills, knowledge, and judgment to operate an aircraft. If you don't demonstrate sound judgment, or if the successful outcome of any of the required tasks are seriously in doubt, you can fail this test. If you exceed a tolerance, such as the 100-foot plus or minus altitude standard, but correct it immediately, that's what the examiner wants to see. If you fail to take action or repeat this error again and again, the examiner will see a pattern and begin to seriously doubt your ability to perform this task, and you will fail. The examiner takes into consideration the flying conditions during the check ride, so on a windy, turbulent day, they will anticipate some possible deviation. But a pattern of failing to maintain altitude or heading, or just not taking any corrective action, indicates a problem. Remember to practice good visual scanning and collision avoidance. This is one of 10 special emphasis areas to which the examiner will be paying particular attention. These areas aren't part of any one maneuver, but rather must be demonstrated throughout the entire flight. They include positive aircraft control, positive exchange of flight controls, stall spin awareness, collision avoidance, wake turbulence avoidance, land and hold short operations, runway incursion avoidance, controlled flight into terrain awareness, aeronautical decision-making, and the use of checklists. On the day of your test, be prepared for all the administrative details by putting together a packet of materials the examiner will want to see. This should include your logbook, a form of ID such as your driver's license, your student pilot license and medical certificate, the FAA 8710 form signed, your knowledge exam test results, a printout of current weather data for that day, and aircraft information such as the airworthiness certificate, the FCC radio license, weight and balance information, and the aircraft's logbook indicating annual inspections. Having this information organized and ready to go will set the tone for the rest of the practical test. If you're not organized, it will send an immediate message to the examiner and it will be difficult to recover from this perception. The first step in any check ride is for the examiner to confirm you're qualified by reviewing your paperwork and logbook entries. Next, it's likely you'll get a pre-test briefing explaining how the test will be conducted, what the standards are, and what the possible outcomes are. Then he or she will announce that the test has begun. Most examiners try to put you at ease, as they understand nervousness can be par for the course. Some will collect their check ride fee as part of the overall paperwork review. Others will wait until the end when they issue the certificate. Be sure to have your payment ready. The examiner's fee is separate from the aircraft rental. The examiner will have given you a specific flight to plan when you scheduled the check ride. Make sure you've done your homework and retrieved the current weather and terminal forecasts along your planned flight path, as well as selected alternates or diversions. The cross-country is the focal point for this test because everything is related to it. How you determine if the aircraft is airworthy for this flight, your pilot currency requirements for this flight, how you arrived at a go, no-go decision for this flight, describing the type of airspace you'll encounter on this flight and how it could affect you, and so on. Using the cross-country makes the test as practical as possible, which is the goal. The FAA wants to see how you will operate as a licensed pilot once they issue your ticket. This pre-flight discussion generally takes an hour and a half to 2 hours. Most examiners will not separate the oral from the flight test. In fact, the FAA has asked them not to. Examiners have been instructed to consider the check ride as one big practical test, not an oral and a flight test. The FAA strongly encourages examiners to use scenarios during testing. This means wording questions to test application and correlation learning. Rather than asking a lot of what questions, which only reveals rote learning, you can expect hows and whys. For example, instead of what is maneuvering speed, an examiner will ask something like, explain the significance of maneuvering speed. Remember, this is an educational program, so relax. We cover much more than the average examiner will question you on in any given test situation. Now, let's join our applicant and examiner in the briefing room and listen as the check ride gets underway.
Hi, Dave. I'm Robin. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Robin. Good to meet you. Robin, all your required paperwork appears to be in order. Looks like you're fully prepared for this private pilot airplane, single-engine land check ride. Let's have a seat over here where we can talk privately. Now, the restrooms are just around that corner. Please feel free to use facilities when you need to. And go ahead and lay out anything you'd like to have access to while we're talking, including your materials for the cross-country that I asked you to prepare. As I start asking you questions, I'd like you to try to answer to the best of your knowledge. Now, if you're stumped, I'd like you to try to derive an answer. Sometimes proving your resourcefulness will be enough, while other times, I expect you to have the knowledge committed to memory. Questioning will continue throughout the entire test. This includes the oral examination taking place right now in the briefing room, out at the pre-flight, during the flight, and post-flight. Your knowledge, it's not a question here. You've already passed the knowledge test. We're here to test the practical application of that knowledge. I'll let you know if you're in error at any point so we can stop and talk about it. Robin, there are 3 possible outcomes to today's test. If you meet all the standards, I'll issue a temporary pilot certificate. If we find an area that doesn't meet the standard, I'll issue a notice of disapproval and ask you to go back and get additional instruction in that area from your instructor. Then you'll be retested at a later date in that area before being issued a pilot certificate. Finally, if we're not able to complete today's test for an unforeseen reason, say weather or mechanical problems, I'll issue a letter of discontinuance. This will allow us to resume the test from where we left off. Do you have any questions before we get started?
No, I think I'm ready.
Okay, the test has begun and we're out flying today. And how's the weather looking for us?
Here, the examiner invites the applicant to give a broad overview of the flying conditions and orientation for the planned flight. Examiners frequently start with a general discussion about the cross-country to put you at ease. It will be an easy topic for you to talk about since you spent a lot of time preparing it. The examiner will ask you where you're going, how the overall weather looks, and how you planned it. From this conversation, it's an easy transition into more specifics on the aircraft, you as the pilot, and the weather. Then the examiner will return to the cross-country planning to look at such specifics as performance and limitations of your airplane, the navigation log, and so on. All this is done with the goal of determining whether you'll be safe when you leave as a newly minted pilot.